Please listen carefully.
Hello, universe, and welcome to the Optimist Daily Update. I'm Amelia Buckley.
And I'm Kristy Jansen, and we are part of the team behind the Optimist Daily, making solutions the news. We bring you reader-funded solutions news every single day to change the tenor of news media, social media, and help make the direction of your day get focused on solutions.
7 days a week, we publish positive news stories written by award-winning journalists and delivered online to your inbox and through our social channels. And also, we are sharing these solutions in a commute-worthy, walk-worthy, home office-worthy, how is it almost October-worthy podcast. Today is Monday, the 27th of September, 2021. Hi, Kristy.
Hi, Amelia. Yes, I think that is a very good question. How in the world did it already get to be October 2021?
It's so strange for me because I feel like I've gone through one of the biggest periods of change in my life over these last 2 years, but it's also been like one of the most stagnant period. I don't know. It's strange. Like, I think that the transition between being in college and not being in college is more than the transition from high school to college for me. Like, it has felt more transformational.
Of course, because now you're an adult who is in the world and you're responsible for yourself in a way that you never were. Even in college, you're still connected to your parents and you still had people telling you what to do. We were talking, was it yesterday we were talking about, or on Friday we were talking about quotes counseling in college?
Yes.
And how it's just non-existent, but it is there apparently. Because I was complaining about my son's high school counselors, which are overwhelmed and unhelpful and uninterested in really helping him as a human being.
They're like,
as far as I can tell.
Out. Leave us alone.
He's not flunking out. So like, what do you want from us? That's kind of the feeling that I get from them. But
he's bad clothed and showing up. So we don't know. Well,
so, we were complaining about that. Yeah, but I understand this has been a year of tremendous transformation for many people. And I think it's been a year and a half, or this 2-year period. We're still in this limbo, I think. And until we actually come really out of it, it's going to be hard to know where we have landed. I feel like we're still kind of up in the air. It's all still kind of inchoate and we don't know what's going to happen. And that sense of not knowing is very anxiety provoking for many people, including me at times.
I agree. I think uncertainty is worse than being like worried about a situation. Like I would rather understand the risks and be concerned about them than have like looming uncertainty.
Yeah.
But that is life. Like it is all
that
uncertain.
Is life, and that is a human trait. We like to pretend that things are fixed and known even when they're in fact not. And speaking of what we didn't know, which we now know, which is totally changing our understanding on things that we thought we knew.
A+ transition.
You're wrong about. What's your headline for today?
Okay, my headline for today, speaking of things that we didn't know that we do now know, or could possibly change in the future, who knows? My headline reads, ancient footprints could be the earliest evidence of humans in the Americas. So this is really exciting research coming out of New Mexico, and there is a team of researchers that actually found ancient footprints in white sands in New Mexico. And I liked this story because I've actually been to white sands and it's incredibly beautiful. So I wanted to highlight it. But it's also interesting because it's research that upends our understanding of human migration and how the earliest humans arrived in the North American interior and the Americas in general. And so essentially, previous research placed the arrival of humans in the North American interior around 16,000 years ago. But these newly discovered ancient footprints indicate that they could have arrived a whole 7,000 years before that, between 23,000 and 21,000 years ago. So it's essentially showing that humans were in the Americas much earlier than we thought.
Right. Actually, just to complicate this even further, because this article is talking about the mainstream accepted science, but in fact, they've already been pushing it back, or there's been evidence mounting that people have been in the American continent for at least since like 24,000 years ago for a while. It keeps getting pushed back. So I've been reading about this. I've been following this. I'm an anthropology, major when I was in college. I did archaeology when I was in undergrad. So I just think it's interesting that these main news articles aren't talking about all the nuanced rethinking of the human engagement with the American continents that has been going on and has been talked about a lot on the archaeology front for the last decade, with DNA evidence changing, with new ways of dating things coming out, with new technologies and other new technologies and new understandings.
Which isn't really surprising if you think about it, because you think about the vastness of the American continent, or like the North American continent at least, and the South American continent. It's huge. And if you had populations migrating across it, there's got to be so much undiscovered evidence of that human activity.
Absolutely. And the people in that era, when the technology level you're using mostly organic materials, stone tools and wood, bone, clothing made out of tree bark, housing made out of trees, all this stuff which biodegrades really quickly. There's not going to be evidence or good evidence of humans on this massive continent. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that is changing is the understanding of how early humans could have come here. I mean, these are modern humans in terms of their genetics, right? But coming here, they were thinking that they had to walk across the land bridge between Asia and Alaska. But in fact, early humans were very good at navigating the oceans. And so there's now new ideas that maybe they came across the oceans or around the oceans, not walking along waterways on the coast.
And back to what you're saying about the organic material, that's what they were saying was so impactful about the fact that they found footprints, because essentially footprints are a catch-all, because they can't migrate between layers of sediment. They are where they were put. And even accounting for something called the reservoir effect, where carbon can get recycled through aqueous environments, which can make some layers appear older. They took account for that. And even taking that into account, the carbon dating showed that they were, more than 20,000 years old.
Yeah. Which I think that's why this is making the news now, because there's a couple of researchers, I think, in Oregon that have found human remains, but it's poop. They're called the poop guys, whatever. But they have found human deposits in caves along the coast of Oregon and Pacific Northwest. And so that's evidence that these are dated back in the 20,000 year ago, 30,000 year ago era. But it's not as clear that it's not a footprint.
Which would make sense if humans were traveling via sea, that they would end up on the Pacific Northwest coast.
Exactly. And the water levels have risen, so whatever remains might have been easily found along the coastlines in this period, which is the last glacial period, so it was covered with ice, is gone. So it's underwater, and so it's hard to find. Yeah. Anyway, I just love this story. You can tell I'm excited about it. I'm glad you chose it. And it yet again shows the uncertainty in what we think of as, quotes, fixed science, because as new information comes to light, we have to reassess and go back. And that is the nature of how science is created.
Part of the magic of it.
Right.
And it's speaking of new discoveries.
Speaking of new discoveries.
And the ocean.
And the ocean and science, my headline also talks about this. The headline reads, "Decolonizing Science. Kiwi scientists take a stand on using Maori language." And this is another fun, interesting article that talks not just about science, but also the changing nature of science. And as we put more emphasis on inclusivity and on bringing indigenous wisdom and other ways of seeing the world into the mainstream way that we understand nature, for example, it really helps to get away from some of the, I think, blindness or blindsided that we could otherwise find ourselves in. So we're always writing about new scientific discoveries on the Optimist Daily, as you can tell from Amelia's headline today. We're also really interested in how new discoveries can help us expand our understanding of the biosphere and of nature and of our role in it. And so this article is about a couple of scientists, Graham Short, who's a ichthyologist based out of California Academy of Sciences, which is in Amelia's hometown, actually. And he also works in New Zealand. And his collaborator, Tom Trinsky of the Auckland Museum. They are marine ecologists and researchers who look at little creatures that live in the ocean. And they identified a new species of pygmy pipe horse, which is a cute little tiny creature that looks a lot like a seahorse. And it's endemic to New Zealand. And they found it in this one area of New Zealand that had never before been identified in the scientific community. It hadn't been written about. And Graham Short, who I know vaguely, or he's a partner of somebody that I know. Anyway, that's how I found this story. Full disclosure, this was something that I decided to bring to the Optimist Daily. He and his collaborator Tom, when they found it, they identifying it and describing it, they reached out to the local Maori tribe, the iwi, which has stewardship of this area of New Zealand, and that's the Ngatiwai tribe. I don't know how you pronounce that properly. I'm sorry to butcher that, but it's the iwi, the tribe, which basically has stewardship of this area, and this is another way that the Maori are oriented around the island. It's not like ownership, it's more care for, but they've been located in this area of the island for generations. And so Short and Trinsky reached out to the tribe to ask them for help in naming this new species and also describing it. And when they wrote their paper, they used the description in Te Reo Maori in describing the animal. And in any given bioregion, indigenous inhabitants are going to be the natural historians with the most knowledge of that area, the people who actually are living there, have lived there for a long time. And so bringing these indigenous languages in, which is going to have more nuance and more kind of ability to describe the specificity of that area in ways that maybe standard English or Latin certainly would not have. So this is part of why Short and Trinsky wanted to include the Maori Te Reo language. However, when they wrote the article, the first publication, the European editors just cut out all that out, even though it was sort of side by side. It was an interesting play on inclusivity and other languages. And the reasoning that these editors gave was that it's not a major language. So that's why they took it out. So Short and Trinsky said, no, the nuanced language of the Te Reo is so much more important than just publishing in your journal. So they withdrew the article. They found a different place to put it out, and they instead published it in ichthyology and herpetology, which was delighted to incorporate the Maori language in the manuscript. And that's just a win for the more indigenous language and indigenous wisdom. And I just love this. And you got to go look at this because it's a cute little creature. Sorry, I'm going on and on, Amelia. Are you still there?
I like it. I was listening intently, and then I was also looking at the picture of the cute little fish. I'll be honest with you. But I love this story. I was struck by the note that they made about the insufficiency of major languages to describe the nuances of the discovery, and that really struck me because one of my favorite New Yorker articles is one that is a list of words in other languages with no translation to the English language. I just think it's so magical that there's words in other languages that describe these like really specific feelings. Like there's one that I love that is also in an indigenous language. There's an Inuit word, and it's I cannot even begin to pronounce it. I don't remember what the word was. But I remember it was the word that was the feeling of waiting for somebody to show up at your house and continuing to go outside and check if they're there yet. And like the Inuit language has a word for that.
I think that's so cool. And it really does influence what vocabulary you have to describe your experiences helps you be more aware of those experiences. If you don't have that word for what does it mean when you are just constantly going outside looking for the person who's coming and hasn't shown up yet, and that emotional state that you're in, which I can completely identify with, but that takes an entire sentence to explain it versus there's a single word which captures that entire feeling state.
It also makes you realize why some other languages or some other cultures are perceived to have more emotional intelligence than Americans. And you kind of realize through their language that you're like, yeah, well, it's ingrained in their culture through language. Right. Just that they have words to describe these really intimate feelings just shows you.
Yeah, and it's interesting how language can And I think they've kind of gotten away from saying that it's deterministic. Like if you have this word and you don't have other words, then you're not going to think. I don't think that's necessarily true. It's not a one-to-one kind of correlation. On the other hand, that nuanced experiential ability to express yourself definitely is the case. And you think about in some languages where they don't have a good sense of future past, it's like I think Chinese is like that. People are better savers.
Yeah.
than like in English speaking society where you think of the future and it feels very far away and the immediate needs seem much more present. But if you're talking about the need to feed yourself when you're old, but that everything is kind of in present tense, that feels more salient and more important. Oh yeah, we better save our money. Otherwise when we retire, we won't have a roof over our heads, right? It feels like it's more important to do right now, whereas English can push it off more easily because we have this sense that that's way in the future. But today I'm fine, so I don't really need to, put money away for my retirement. One example. Or if you look at girls have an easier time explaining their emotions. We're taught to be more emotionally aware and attuned, whereas boys a lot of times aren't given those tools, and then you get to that's where a lot of marriages can have trouble.
You get to adulthood and you realize that you've been conditioned not to express yourself your entire life.
Boys are told to not express themselves, and in fact being sad is not a valid emotion for a boy because it's a feminine emotion. It's like it's not appreciated, and so they pretend that they're not, when that's just a normal human emotion, and every single person has experiences of sadness and joy and anger, right? So, sorry, we're going on and on about
what else is on the Optimist Daily. We've gone all the way from footprints to fish to sadness.
Footprints to fish to sadness, all about human experience, right? We have 10 tips to prevent food waste in our gardens. We have an article about bacteria that can filter toxic metals out of wastewater to make it more drinkable. And also an article, we were talking about this before, I almost chose it, but the sushi of the future will have fish-free versions of tuna that's made of fungi. And I could definitely go for some mushroom sushi. I don't know about you guys. What else, Amelia?
We've got an AI system that is designed to protect roosting bats, how to avoid the 3 most common fall allergies, 6 in-season superfoods to add to your grocery list this fall, and this printing method eliminates the need for harmful dyes and pigments. As always, there is more on theoptimistdaily.com. And thank you guys all for listening to the Optimist Daily Update this morning. We promise to continue to share positive, solution-based stories with ideas on how you can participate in this changing world and ensure it is changing for the good. We promise to cover the current events with accuracy, legitimate sources, and offer you all the information that you need to chart new paths for all of us.
And if you haven't already signed up, go on the website, check it out, take the free subscription to the newsletter. And if you like what we do and you want to support us, then consider becoming an emissary on theoptimistdaily.com. And for starting at $5 a month, you can help support independent, reader-funded journalism and be a part of this solution-changing consciousness that addresses our world's biggest challenges with a problem-solving mindset. And you can be a part of what keeps us going and keeps us free for everybody who needs it on the Optimist Daily, and supported by those of us who can. Thanks so much, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll be back tomorrow with more solutions.
Bye, guys.